Welcome to the Fashion Situation Room, a podcast from the front lines of the fashion industry. I'm your host, Michael Jordan, and these are my two co-hosts.
Hello, I'm Britta Cabanos.
And hey there, I'm Peter McLaughlin.
In this podcast, we offer you real talk about what impacts the fashion industry, particularly through the 4 S's: strategy, sustainability, storytelling, and solutions. With our finger on the pulse of the most meaningful business trends, which we'll also bring to life with impactful guests along the way, we aim to provide you with actionable insights that will benefit you. Thank you for joining us. Let's jump in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Fashion Situation Room and to our 6th episode. Our roots are growing deeper. I'm your host, Michael Jordan, here with my co-hosts, Britta Cabanos from the front lines of conscious fashion education, and Peter McLaughlin, a fashion sustainability strategist.
Hi, hello, friends. Hi.
In our podcast, we focus on what we call the 4 S's of the global trillion-dollar fashion industry: strategy, sustainability, solutions, and storytelling, all to somehow benefit you, our growing and loyal audience. But we also invite in guests from the front lines who can inspire us, especially in fashion entrepreneurship and those with the courage to venture out on their own. Today's guest is one such person, Dior Delophont Gleysteen, founder of fashion house Maison Kebu here in New York City. Dior, please join us.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Dior.
Bonjour. Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Let me introduce Dior to our audience. Dior's path started in France, where she was first a high-level track and field athlete with dreams of competing in the Olympics. Then she apprenticed in couture ateliers. She came to Kent State in Ohio to pursue fashion and sports. Her senior year, she was selected to showcase her collection at Beijing Fashion Week. And as an 8-time All-American track star, she was inducted into the Kent State Athletics Hall of Fame. Meanwhile, since graduating, she's worked for Calvin Klein, PVH Corp, where she designed global product collections and high-profile collaborations. After several years, she moved on to Macy's to manage the strategy of multi-billion-dollar apparel and accessories brands. In 2026, earlier this year, Dior launched her own couture house based in NYC, Maison Kebu, inspired by her global journey. So Dior, let me ask the first question. You've built your latest collection around your global brand and turned that into around your global background and turned that into your brand's identity and storytelling. How has adding such personal details, like naming your business after your childhood nickname, Kebu, influenced your designs? And has this drawn in customers and helped them connect to your recently launched brand? But also, let's start with how the lessons learned from your remarkable athletic career shaped your identity, your brand identity.
Wow. Well, thank you, first of all, for this great introduction, Michael. It's quite something.
Avec plaisir. Go ahead, please.
Well, first to answer your question, and I think there's a few parts to it, right? This concept of identity is obviously paramount to building a brand, and obviously in my case, building Maison Kebu. As someone who lived most of my life as a child in France, except for a few years where I relocated to Japan with my family, and then coming to the United States for college, evolving here in the New York City landscape of fashion, I'd like to say it sounds very glamorous to say I'm a global citizen, but at the same time, there's always that search for identity because you belong in a few different places, but you never quite fully fit in. And thus building a fashion company for me has been part of that journey of realizing who I am in that place where I can blend all of these inspirations from having lived in France, incorporating the Baroque architectural details from my hometown, but also embracing the rich fabrications that I was exposed to when I lived in Japan. But lastly, I'm most excited to combine all of that into a brand that embodies the effortless New York City women's lifestyle. And thus, I'd say the brand is part of my identity, but it's also now taken flight as its own brand, rooted here in New York City, designed and crafted here in the Garment District, but designed for the world with this global perspective.
Well, just one quick follow-up then. I mean, as such a high-level athlete, I can only imagine that you were very disciplined and resilient, determined. And I'm wondering, just with your own career then, especially launching your own brand, do you see that you've applied any of those lessons learned to what you're doing today from your sports career?
Absolutely. I'd say I'm sure many athletes can relate to the feeling of always striving for the higher goal, the next championship, training day in and day out with a single goal in mind. So when I stopped doing high level sports after college, that was actually a very difficult transition into a normal life. And thus, I love to say now that I found my next high level sports career in the form of entrepreneurship. The skills required are very similar. You need that day in, day out drive. You can't be scared of rejection. It's similar to training for a certain championship. There's a lot of failure that happens in sports. And some people tell me when I talk about Maison Kebu, you know, it's great. It looks like you've done sports, you know how to win. But I like to counter by saying, I think I've learned how to lose and then get back up from those failures or losses. And I think that's what makes great athletes. And in turn, I'd like to believe that's what can make for a great entrepreneurial preparation.
Cool. Interesting. Britta, go ahead. What else would you like to ask?
Yeah, no, I love hearing that answer. And I imagine the life of an athlete has trained you and prepped you for so many things in real life and business. And so I have a question about education. And we've had a few guests on our podcast that were talking about a lot about fashion education because it's so different today than it was years ago. And you have gone, like you've studied, you graduated, you've worked in corporate, and now building your own brand. If you think back to your education, what was it that best prepared you for all of this?
I think what prepared me the most was always having multiple chords to my instrument. I don't believe that's the official expression people use, but what I learned most in school was juggling, obviously sports, but most importantly, being immersed in so many parts of learning about the industry, whether that be going from a sewing class to a fully theoretical class about history of fashion to then going into a fabric and textile manipulation class where you're dyeing samples, but you're also learning about the chemical composition of those fabrics. I think having that well-rounded knowledge provided for a great base as I went into the industry. And when I was at Kent State University, they actually did have that very well-rounded approach to the curriculum that I was able to bring in when I embraced the real world.
Yeah, one thing I recall from my education is having one of the sewing classes, and I had to go buy 60 yards of tulle for some project. And you know, you're sewing and you're trying to build this garment, but then you're preparing for a test, like a written test or something else. So school really did kind of throw you into like hands-on versus studying versus, you know, all those different elements. So for sure, that's, yeah, definitely prepares you and gives you a little bit of dose of the reality of the industry.
Totally. And I'd like to add to time management. I think
Time management for sure.
The biggest lesson of all, learning that a project will take on average 2.5 times longer than you expect when it comes to the fashion industry is a lesson that's best learned early on because I'd like to say it never stops. I mean, if you know, I know in this room you're familiar with the industry. If you've ever been backstage at a fashion show, it's the same scramble as the senior year collection handoff, and thus learning all those lessons at a smaller scale is definitely highly valuable.
No matter how much you prepare, there's still something that could go wrong or something that you're scrambling last minute. Yeah. So
something does always go wrong, and I can confirm this, having manufactured our beautiful pieces here in New York City. Something always does go wrong at the moment you least expect it, and thus it's about pivoting quickly and as efficiently as possible.
Yeah, staying flexible.
Yeah, because not only that, like even whenever you're drawing something, the amount of time that takes or making a garment, like that takes time. It's not like you're studying finance where you're reading a book. You know what I mean? There is physical time and effort that then goes into creating a product.
I agree. There is a physical toll actually in
Yeah.
fashion, which people outside of the industry don't quite grasp. Of course, there's the late nights, and as you were saying, Peter, I'm sure that also is reflected in other industries, but you also have to be able to see clearly, use your hands, and the hand-eye coordination once you've been
Mm.
sewing the same zipper 3 times in a row can
Yeah.
become a much bigger issue than if you just had to write a paper.
Oh,
There's also the mental health toll, which we've discussed before, but we'll also
Yep.
explore in future episodes.
yeah, that's a whole other episode.
Whole other episode.
Becoming a
Peter,
therapy session.
yeah.
So my question would be more around now that you've gone into and starting your own brand, is then your aesthetic. Because whenever I look back at some well-established brands. So for example, like Dolce Gabbana, which was established in 1985, if you look at their book, like 20 years of Dolce Gabbana, you can see like how where they started, and it was all black and somber because they were very much influenced at the time by all the Japanese designers coming to show at Paris, like Comme des Garçons and Yuji Yamamoto, etc., and Izumaki. But then for you, so having come from like Calvin Klein and Macy's, like what really inspired you or motivated you to then go it alone after working in corporate to launch your own brand? And then what gap or opportunities do you see in the market for your brand? And then how would you define that aesthetic as it grows?
And Dior, before you respond, I would like to show our audience, which must be very curious about what your aesthetic, what your brand actually looks like. Can you see
Oh, yeah, we
the
can.
image? Yeah, Maison
Yeah, we can
Kebu. So
see.
there's the home page, and just for a sense. So go ahead. I mean, you can of course tell us what we're seeing on the screen, but please do respond to
And
what Peter
and
said.
just for our listeners, the website is maisonkebu.com. Go
Mm-hmm.
ahead.
Mm-hmm. Go
Well,
ahead.
thank you for showcasing that.
Of course.
Yes, Peter, your question was, sorry, would you mind reminding me what you
Oh,
said?
sure.
I
It
got
I
was
distracted
distracted.
with
I'm
the
sorry. I'm
website and I was
sorry.
like, wow.
Yeah, it's my fault.
well, it was like, as you're building your aesthetic, like how would you define your aesthetic? And like, was it because you identified a gap in the market that you wanted to go for? And is that really what inspired you to therefore leave corporate to start up your own brand?
Yeah, definitely. So the inspiration behind launching my own brand has been truly a childhood dream. Since I was a young teen living in France, I decided that one day I would be a fashion designer, to my family's surprise, since no one was in fashion. My mother was sewing a lot when I was growing up, so I'd like to, say it's probably from watching it happening in front of my eyes. So that's when I started to learn in local ateliers and started to
That's
get
how Gianni Versace started. His mother was a seamstress.
exactly. I think there comes a lot of learning from just watching and understanding, wow, you can take a 2D element and build it into your own reality. That's what I'm passionate about. So I have always had this dream of being a fashion designer. That's what drew me to coming to study in the US so I could continue on this path of fashion design while also doing high level sports. And ultimately, while I obviously started in the industry and learned the ropes at some of the most iconic houses in New York City, I never truly gave up in the back of my mind on this idea at the right time to try it out on my own. And thus, when I launched the brand, it was an exercise of understanding, okay, I've seen so many things. I've seen how product is made. I've seen how to scale and launch large brands. But now that it's just little old me, what is going to make that brand special? And it started with jotting down my ideas, building our first collection, and truly hearing from our clients what they were thinking of it. And that's when I realized there was truly this gap currently in the luxury market between brands that have been moving faster and faster, right? We've seen quality declining. We've seen also a homogenization across the board of brand experiences, products. There's this authenticity and authentic relationship that had been built for years with a client base that has been lost. And thus, I noticed these women who were feeling uninspired, overlooked, excluded as well from the product collections that were being offered. And Maison Kebu kind of came as this solution of, okay, if we go back to the roots of luxury, it's something that's defined in the dictionary as something that should bring feelings of pleasure, satisfaction, and ease. And that's really what's formed my perspective and vision as I grew the foundation for Maison Kebu, was how to make our client inspired with a unique story, of course, rooted in my identity, but also, building an intimate touch point as we talk to the client, as we sell to them, embracing their bodies for where they're at in life, and actually creating clothes that can meet and actually exceed what our client is expecting now, living a 21st century as things have changed and evolved. So that was a little bit of what started the journey.
And from for the listeners, for example, who weren't able to see the visuals on screen, how would you describe your aesthetic?
Yeah, so I think we're now really establishing ourselves as the destination for elegant fluidity. We are most known for beautiful silk fabrics. They're highly textural. We have a beautiful hammered silk fabric that is honestly a very substantial weight that you can't find in the market nowadays. Being direct to consumer, we're able to provide our client with this beautiful fabrication. It's something you can just throw on, look put together without actually sacrificing any of the comfort and ease that you'd want on your day-to-day life, or even if you're going out. It's also pieces that feel versatile for specifically starting in New York. Of course, I have the New York City women in mind. So it's something you can put on after work to catch up with friends, but you could also dress it up, wear it to the opera. We have an opera coat actually that's 100% silk brocade. It's got all of this amazing embellishment, and you can see the Baroque inspiration truly showing through. So it's all about this story of designing from my perspective, which is inspired by the body in movement. Being an ex-athlete, of course, that has become such an important part of who I am and who I see the Maison Kebu women embodying.
Yeah, it seems very flexible, that it could go from work to evening just by different styling.
Absolutely.
And just to follow up on Peter's question, so it's one thing for you to have that sort of courage to go it alone, but was there something about the timing? Why now that you felt that this is the time to do it? Was there something going on that triggered that?
I think, I said for a long time, in 10 years, well, the 10 years passed, the market changed. I saw the opportunity I was just talking about, and it felt like we are at this inflection point. There is this craving from the client for a unique story, as we've seen the legacy groups getting larger and larger, and the stories sort of losing a little bit of their touch. And thus, this felt like the time where we could get a response, where we could, try it out. And some people may think this is crazy, but I truly believe being a house rooted in becoming this legacy of artistry and craft made right here in New York City, in 10 years, people will say, wow, turns out that was the time. I don't think it's going to get any easier in many ways. And this was a time where I think this product has a chance to shine and truly deliver on a craving in the market.
And speaking of that, your global journey, how has that shaped your brand across three continents, right? Starting in Europe, North America, well, Europe, then Japan, then
Correct.
the US. But looking at your brand, there are a number of items with Japanese themes, the Japanese indigo dyed cotton I saw, a kimono.
Correct.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
how has your global journey, yeah, the kimono silk, how has
yeah. So
your global journey shaped your brand, your identity? Japanese indigo dyed cotton.
Yeah, I think
Oh,
each step in the journey really brought a new angle to my perspective. And I know, Peter, you may also have a perspective on having lived across
Oh,
several different
definitely.
continents.
mhm.
But obviously, coming from France, it's known worldwide that there's a certain sense of aesthetic that was then, I'd like to say, enriched by living in Japan, witnessing the symbolism, the meaning that can come from the very intentional way of dressing, whether it be traditionally or even for the everyday, and thus, then moving to the United States and discovering the energy in New York City. It was kind of this moment of
Mm,
realizing, what does my identity mean when I can blend this sense of effortless confidence
mm,
with all of the beautiful Baroque inspiration, the Art Nouveau from my hometown, with the rich silks, the textures, the shine also that comes from my time spent in Japan. And thus, I like to blend all three. I think depending on the collection, you may see one of the influences take over a little bit more.
mm.
But overall, our signature is rooted in that sense of effortlessness and also always a rich color palette, once again inspired by those rich textiles that I was touching as a child.
Well, then just a quick follow-up. So what's on your mind right now? What sort of ideas are in your head right now?
Wow.
You like to bring to life?
Like for next season,
Yeah.
next
Yes,
selection?
absolutely. Well, a great question. We're actually currently brainstorming that next collection now that I've realized how much people are enjoying the hammered silk, its weight, the way it reflects color, its shimmering surface. That's probably going to be a big part of the next collection. So I'm now thinking about what other pieces would our Maison Kebu women want to have in her closet in that specific fabric. So I'm excited to reveal a little bit of a preview of what I have in mind via sketches during our next salon, which should be coming up in June. But
Oh,
it's very much the talk of the moment. And in parallel with that, this is for the made to order collection, but I'm also working on a couple of couture orders for the next fall and winter season. So that's also very high, obviously, on my mind, as that's a very involved process where it's much more tailored and personalized to the person who wants a piece of Maison Kebu, but that works for her specifically.
Dior, may I ask and just follow up with that, that within your collection, do you have a specific concept around it? Meaning, because you talked about like it's being slow fashion and craft, is it one of those that as you add pieces, that the core collection stays the same, and so whether colors or thing or pieces, just it grows to sort of complement that, so that as a consumer or a customer can therefore just build on the same collection? Or whenever you come to your next salon, will it be more like going in a different direction, different colors, different silhouettes?
Peter, I can tell you have the expert's eye right here trying to figure out the assortment architecture, and I totally appreciate that. So I think you've hit the nail on the head. We have this core collection, and as our goal is to be a timeless destination for our client, we will try to really hone in on that core piece that our client can come back to, add new colors to her wardrobe season after season, or even build upon a collection that can be treasured. So I always look at the greats in fashion history, and when we think of how the Pleats collection has existed for over 20 years at this point, and people keep adding to their collections, right? Or they're even searching for these vintage items because they know it's still that same trusted fabric. It's got a great drape. It's unique. When you see it, you know who it's from. So I'd say we have very much this approach of building upon this very strong foundation, but we'll always have those unique pieces, just like the opera coat. This is really based on the sourcing process. If I'm able to find a beautiful silk brocade, even if it's in a low quantity, which means we can only have three pieces, that will always be a part of the brand, because I believe that's what speaks to people. It's the emotional piece. And also that's where I get to showcase truly what's in the back of my mind, and adding more to the story.
mm.
I love that you found your hammered silk And
Mhm.
that can become your signature kind of iconic material that you could bring season after season, but maybe in a different weight or a different color. But that could become your thing. And it's a beautiful signature, you know, material that speaks to your brand and that your customer will then know that that's you. And 20 years from now, they'll
Mhm.
recognize it because it's your own thing.
Right.
I really like that. Yeah.
Mm.
I'm going to ask you a question about launching your business and your collection. I think we have a lot of people in our audience that are young, aspiring designers like you, where they're dreaming one day they'll have their own collection. So could you share a little bit, like what's the most, I don't know, what would be the most challenging parts that you went through and any advice or recommendations for those future entrepreneurs and how do they get through those tough challenges and the roadblocks that I'm sure you encountered along the way?
And the worst mistake you've made? No, no, go
Yeah, you can throw that into it. All
Rookie
learning opportunities.
Well, for launching a business, of course, I'm very early, so I really have to say, anyone listening to this, please take it with a grain of salt, and maybe Britta, Peter, and Michael, you can each add on to what I'm going to say from your perspectives. But one key thing that people forget a lot about fashion is it is a business, however glamorous, however fun, however shiny and frivolous it may look, it is always going to be backed by, at some point, a level of financial integrity and planning for the long term. So, for anyone who is thinking about launching, I would definitely say try to get as much clarity as you can on what is in your mind in terms of course, your product, the dream, but then also taking it down a notch and thinking about, okay, the dream looks great, but how do we make this dream happen and be sustained for the future? Now, keep in mind, I'm saying this as an under a year old, designer founder in many ways. Before that, I was learning at the large companies about all these dynamics that go on behind the scenes, building an assortment, sustaining interest, building the story around it, but also protecting yourself legally. So I'd say it's a multifaceted business. It's not an easy business. And
Mhm.
that's before starting it, just getting clarity at least on what you want, what your strengths are, so you can get help to fill those gaps where maybe it's the business side, maybe it's the legal side, maybe it's the operations as a whole is definitely very important in my opinion.
Well,
Yeah, I think there's a lot of creative talent out there, but maybe not so much on the business knowledge of how to actually set up the business and like you were saying, financing. I don't think people realize how much sample making costs and pattern makers and fit models and there's all of those components that go into it and well you talked about thinking about this years and years ago. So I also think it takes time. And I love the fact that you worked at these corporations and you learned all of those different aspects. There's nothing better than getting paid to learn. So,
Right.
working in the industry at some of these bigger companies and using that as your education to prepare for your future business. And so you were thinking about this for years before you actually got to a point where you could launch it.
Absolutely. And definitely worked on it for a couple of years, part-time on my own time, unpaid, building the
Yeah.
samples, the prototypes, testing out our sales model. Could we sell through private salons? What would that look like? What would the demand be? So yes, there are many steps between the dream and the reality, but because if someone's not business minded doesn't mean they can't do it. It's just more about identifying, okay, if I need that, I just need to budget and account for someone who is going to come in, and actually help bring that vision to life.
so because we also focus on storytelling, can can you describe one of these examples of when the light bulb went off, when you had a revelation about it's not just about the collection, but actually making this work as a business? Maybe there's something in recent months that really sticks with you.
Yeah, I think in many ways I had thought through a lot of the prototyping. I had built this collection around this beautiful inspiration from my hometown, very proud to show it. And I followed someone's advice actually in the first place. It was like, well, get it in front of some people. You know, you must have some people who will come and see it. And actually from this initial circle of people coming to see the few pieces we had at a very tiny event is when I got the first pre-orders, and that was kind of the light bulb of, okay, we have people who do want to be part of this story. We have people who love the silk. That was a great learning. I would have never known had I not done a little bit of this test, and thus always keeping an eye on what the client is interested in and what the market's doing is definitely what feels like it's key to me. But Peter, you may have something to add to that because you're also very involved in the space.
No, I totally agree, because I think what you're mentioning whenever you're saying listening to customers, I think that is ultimately key. As my example of the Dolce Gabbana thing, if you go through that book where it starts off all black, you can see where it's suddenly a bit of color, then it's a bit sexy, and so where they started off aesthetically to where they ended up is literally night and day. And so it's really only listening and taking on board what the feedback is, and that is like sales are feedback. And then you can see what works, and it's like, oh, they're responding to color. Let me do more color. Oh, they're responding to sexy. Let me do something sexier or whatever. And so it's really about building and learning, because but I would also then say it's also about believing in your aesthetic. Because if you look at Tom Brown, for example, he had a vision of an aesthetic and he stuck with it. People didn't get it, they didn't understand those small shrunken jackets that you couldn't move in, and dressing as a schoolboy for someone in their 30s. But he stuck with it, and look where his company is now. Ultimately, I think you find your audience, and therefore it's about finding your tribe, and people who get it then will ultimately come to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think
And that might take time. So you have to be ready to keep going year after year and
Determination.
yep, determination, wait for that moment and keep working at it.
Yeah. And if you're not that, like if you're the creative and you're not great with math, then hire someone to do that. Like, ultimately surround yourself with the team that can do the parts that you can't, but focus on what you can do.
Right, totally. Like save your time because actually you like banging your head on a wall trying to figure out something you're not good at or not trained at is going to be such a waste of time versus having someone who can actually in 20 minutes maybe solve that problem that felt
Yeah.
so daunting before. So it is ultimately about teamwork. And I think people sometimes may think, oh, I want to build my own house and it's going to be me and that's it.
Mhm.
I think that's a great misconception as well. It takes a lot of teamwork and a lot of
100%. You look at any of the big houses, there's fleets of designers underneath them, but only one person comes out and takes a bow. They do not do it all.
Or just ask ChatGPT.
right. This is a
I'll
new world.
solve it all for you.
Peter, you want to ask about sourcing?
Um, well, sure. So, just going on, whenever you were talking about your, like about building your business and stuff like that, like one of the hardest things for small designers is really finding where you source your materials and who makes it, especially if you have, very small MOQs. So, like, how were you able to overcome that?
MLQs?
Oh,
Minimum
yeah,
order
minimum order quantity.
quantity.
Do we need
So,
subtitles with this podcast, Peter? Okay. Yes.
It's one of those that it's like, like sometimes if you go to a factory, they won't even entertain you unless you're talking like thousands or hundreds of or orders. So considering Dior is doing a made to order business model at the minute, it can be tricky for someone because they will do a sample for you, but they won't necessarily then take the order if it's not worth their time.
Okay.
So as a fledgling
Yeah.
business, that can be very difficult. How did you
That's
feel? How did you overcome that challenge?
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely the daily challenge, I'd like to say, as any small designer, is getting that foot through the door with the right vendors. So it was first a lot of searching for a partner in terms of the atelier that makes the clothes, finding someone who, was open to doing this model, someone who then could deliver on the quantity. And then when it comes to the fabrics themselves, the truth is, for a lot of it, we don't yet benefit from all these economies of scales of working, with the large houses on their latest fabric. So a lot of it is about being very creative. Can we work with those great silk fabric houses, but also get the fabric maybe from last season, or being very intentional about, we have one signature print in the assortment, and that's done on an accessory, something that we knew we'd be able to offer at a small quantity, a small batch, as opposed to made to order. So I think it's about finding, it's a bit of a Tetris game of what can I do right now with my budget resources, and what are we aspiring to move towards. And I've talked to other founders in New York City across apparel, but also jewelry. There's many people who have had those moments of, okay, you think your sourcing is broken, but then that means you're on to the next path of, now we're making a few more orders, we need a new facility. So that's been a big part of the plan, is having those partners, the ones we work with today, but also the ones for the future, who will accompany us as we grow.
Does it feel like they're more willing? Because I've noticed a lot of, like, even on LinkedIn, a lot of people, factories are reaching out to me randomly, like, do you need anything? So I feel like the manufacturing side of things is they're looking for business, and they're all saying, oh, very low MOQs, only 100 pieces. So that it's kind of like a sales pitch that started coming out recently, because I think they need the work. So does that kind of shift, who's willing to do what for smaller brands?
I was just going to say, Peter, I don't know if you want to take half of this question with me, but I'm happy to share my perspective. I make everything for the apparel in New York City. We have a small capacity for accessories in Italy, so I think it's a little bit of a different landscape. We know the overseas vendors have been extremely, I guess, have had to deal with more obstacles, including tariffs in the past few years. So I think that may be why there's been more and more messaging. For us, it's a little bit of a different situation. There are very good ateliers in New York. Some of them are looking for business, but I'd say most of them have very good clients, and they know what they're doing. They can do it really well. And thus, sometimes it's much more about us pitching ourselves as a brand to then work with them and benefit from the years of experience they've accumulated and the workforce they've trained over the years. And that's truly what I'm passionate about. In my dream world, in 20 years, we will have grown this hub of craftsmanship, similar to how Hermes does it in France. The US is the #1 luxury market in the world. And I truly think there is space for this house to sort of sponsor the growth of craft, not just maintaining it, but truly investing in the work, in the craft, training artisans to be able to carry forward that tradition.
Yeah, because sadly at the minute, like, the garment district is under threat, and they're talking about trying to kick the factories that are there out, because of course they want the buildings for housing and apartments and things like that. But it's also very interesting because they have a lot of very heavy equipment, and those floors are reinforced. And so a lot of those companies were like, we can't go anywhere else. Where are you meant to go? So it's really great that you're supporting the businesses that are there and are still thriving.
I'm happy to hear that there's people in New York and domestically that can achieve the quality that you're looking for.
Absolutely. I think people underestimate New York City a lot. Turns out I have seen both sides of the industry in Paris, in New York, and you can actually do quite a lot more in New York City than people, I think, perceive in their minds. And I think now that people are more open to unique stories, feeling closer to where their clothes are made, I think now is a good time to kind of amplify that story and tell it through the clothes.
Yeah, and made in New York, it's a really differentiation for your brand.
Yeah. And it
Hmm.
gives you the capability to make to order, which is
Absolutely.
sustainable. So we're also, chatting about sustainability, and that's a great way to do it is you're not producing overproduction and having inventory storage situations and the customer, I think, has to, including myself, is like learning to wait for something great, for something special. I'm not getting it on Amazon. I'm gonna order this piece and it might take 8 weeks or something to get, but then it's going to be mine for life and it's going to be special to me, made by you.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very intentional process. And right now, because we are generally meeting people who are believers in this,
Mm.
local craft, believers in the vision for Maison Kebu, we're able to offer a complimentary fitting. So truly, as you were saying, that piece
Yeah.
is something you will keep for life because we are making it yours. And
Mm.
I think it's a great way to also hear from clients when I go to fittings, what their preferences are, what they're actually loving about the piece versus maybe would like to see updated in the next collection. So I think it's kind of that dance of navigating our vision, but keeping a pulse on what are people loving, what is bringing out that emotion. I had someone say, oh, this set, it was the hammered silk set, and it's a beautiful vibrant red. It's our écarlate color, which means scarlet in French. And she just said, it feels like PJs, but I look put together. And I was like, this is
Yeah.
exactly the goal.
Yeah. And that's how you build your brand loyalty is
Mhm.
you are providing that very special touch to the customer. So
Mm.
they're going to come back again and again.
Hmm.
Yeah, that would be the goal.
Dior, let me ask you about sustainability because that's also one of our four S's. And in general, it's much easier for companies that are just starting out like yours to entrench sustainability principles rather than retrofitting later. And so we're curious to know how have you woven in sustainability into your brand, and are you often asked about this by stores, buyers, consumers, that sort of thing, about where you stand in sustainability?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think Brida did a good job of analyzing. We are so small and really turned towards this intentional process right now. We use fabrics that are 100% silks, 100% cotton. We avoid, uh, I forget the name. What was it the name? The monstrous hybrids that were once
The blends.
the word
Yeah.
used in the
Mm.
industry for products that were made from all these different blends that couldn't even be recycled because of that. So we're very intentional in the way we approach the process at the fiber level, at the garment making level. Of course, for us, there is very little waste. We keep even the scraps to be utilized in other creations. And then on the long term, I want to be able to grow in that direction. Even when we introduce ready to wear in a couple of years from now, still want to have that mindset of producing to meet the client where they're at, as opposed to just producing for the sake of producing.
So do you hear about it often from stores, buyers, and consumers? Does it come up
So I
often?
don't work directly with stores at the moment. We're direct to consumer. We're very focused on what the client asks for. And I think what the clients have been asking a lot more from brands about is that clarity on the fiber content. I think a lot of people have become disillusioned with the astronomical price hikes in the past few years that weren't matched by an elevated level of scrutiny and transparency on the fibers in their clothes. And I have clients who say, oh, I wouldn't go to a brand that offered the same silhouette if it wasn't 100% silk, because that is something that to them signifies, okay, I do know what's in my clothes. I value the way it's made, and it does make a difference.
Wow.
And ultimately, if it's 100% of any fabric, that means it's easier to recycle.
Mhm.
It's the blended ones that are not. So, Dior, let me, one of the things that we do is we end all of our episodes with asking our guest for a call to action. So, what would your call to action for anyone listening be?
My call to action would be support local craft, And if you do support local craft, then you should definitely, look at the Maison Kebu website. But not only, we have a great, vibrant community here of designers across all areas. It's not just apparel, there is accessories. There are milliners who make hats. We have a beautiful community of jewelers also with the jewel district and thus the diamond district. And thus, I think just having that mindset of when it is so easy to click, and in our increasingly digital and superficial world, it feels like that click can just get you anything. Choose the intentional, and I think the rewards will be worth it. A lot of people say, I never thought I could feel so excited about a piece because of its story, because I know where it comes from, because I can go back and know the house and be a patron of the house, a patron of local artistry.
That's a great answer.
I love that.
Notes. Anything else, guys? Any other comments?
No.
Any other last minute piece of advice for aspiring entrepreneurs?
Follow your dreams. That is what got me to where I am today. No matter what the future holds, I'll be the better for all the decisions I made, which were in this mindset of following the dream. So I'd say, keep at it, keep working hard, and you will get to a great place.
And you
Love
too
that.
can compete in the Olympics. Okay, well,
no, it's the rat race.
She's running a marathon now, no longer tracking.
Yeah.
So-
You've got a very long marathon ahead of you.
Dior, thank you so much for joining us, and for our listeners, for our viewers. If you like what you heard, please send us ideas for future topics, for future guests. But give us a like, subscribe, help spread the word as we look forward to continue with these sorts of interesting guests from the front lines. Okay?
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Dior.
A pleasure. Thank you very much. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
That's it for today's episode of The Fashion Situation Room.
Thanks for spending time with us on the front lines of fashion.
If you found value in this conversation, please subscribe, share, and leave a review. It helps us bring more meaningful voices to the table.
And what call to action did you take? Let us know in the comments. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.